everyone, welcome to Global Business Africa with insights into Africa's ever-changing business landscape. I am Peninah Karibe in Nairobi. Let's begin with some market news. Mixed reactions from major bourses here in Africa. The Nairobi Securities Exchange traded in positive territory, having taken a break yesterday for the Mashujaa Day holiday. Fahari REIT, which is a real estate investment trust, was one of the top gainers today, up 6.73%. Nigeria's equities market closed further in the green zone as investors continued to buy value counters ahead of the third quarter earnings reports. Let's take a look at what's coming up in the show tonight. We're looking at how Moody's downgrade of Ethiopia's credit rating will affect the country's economy. The UK and New Zealand reach a new free trade agreement. And South Africa explores floating solar technology to boost renewable energy. We kick off tonight's show in East Africa. Credit ratings agency Moody's has cut Ethiopia's sovereign credit rating for a second time since May. It's citing a delay in the nation's planned debt restructuring and an escalating civil war in the Tigray region. The company has lowered the rating one level to CAA2. Back in March, Moody's placed the country on review for downgrade before cutting the rating 2 months later. The outlook is negative. A creditor committee to discuss Ethiopia's debt restructuring was formed in September, 8 months after the government announced plans to reorganize its liabilities under a Group of 20 relief program. Meanwhile, a civil war in the nation has intensified, with government troops carrying out airstrikes this week in the Tigray region. Let's get more insights from Mgad Erasmus. She's a senior financial economist at Oxford Economics Africa and joins us live via Zoom from Paarl, just outside of Cape Town in South Africa. Mgad, what impact is this downgrade likely to have on Ethiopia's economy and the debt restructuring?
Oh, good evening. Thank you for having me. Just to kick it off, we just have to make a strong distinction between countries with market access and countries without market access. So earlier this year, when Ethiopia initially submitted the request for the common framework and the debt treatment thereunder, it had a much more severe impact due to the surprise announcement that came about of it. However, since then, a lot has transpired. At this stage, Ethiopia has been excluded from market access for quite a few months and has also been grabbing headlines across the globe with the escalating inflation and the looming sanctions, which is associated thereof. So the implication is that whereas earlier this year, the market implications were much more severe, now as Ethiopia has already lost access to market funding, it has been much more muted. Rather, the Moody's statement just once again shone the light on the dire situation that Ethiopia is finding itself in, and also the potential consequences for private sector creditors. While this is not new, they're just highlighting that it might be larger now than has been estimated previously. For Ethiopia itself, it's much more limited in terms of the impact, having already lost access to market funding.
And Moody's says it expects the creditor committee's decision on what debt treatment to apply to take some time, during which period Ethiopia has no access to official and market-based external funding. So what can the country do to reduce external borrowing?
Well, Ethiopia has lost this access for quite some time now. With the kickoff of the conflict, it was in November of last year already, they have quite swiftly lost their grant support, and this has since been stepped up. In a way to bridge this gap with your external funding requirements, Ethiopia has been looking to increase their FDI appeal. This was primarily via the telecom sector liberalization, which is still underway as one avenue. And as another avenue, just trying to broaden the base of hard currency receivables. Now, the problem that Ethiopia is facing is due to a structural current account deficit. this stage, with high trending Brent crude prices, your import bill is even under more pressure. Unfortunately, it does mean that your external funding requirement is still very large and very difficult to rein in. On the other hand, FDI appeal has, due to the certain idiosyncrasies and reputational risks, unfortunately been shrinking. So the avenue that Ethiopia was looking towards to bridge this gap with the fall away in grant support and the structural shortfall in terms of your current account, specifically merchandise trade, it's much more difficult to bridge this gap. Now, the problem that's actually coming up is the expiry of the debt service suspension initiative. This will expire at the end of this year. So Ethiopia will then again face a full repayment schedule. And this is set against the base of a lowering or narrowing hard currency receivables base, which is quite problematic. Now, how Ethiopia will get out of this gap, so to speak, is much more difficult. Now, due to the structural deficit, unfortunately, it's very difficult to broaden your merchandise income. However, the way that Ethiopia can still go about is rapidly increasing the field of FDI. However, this will really elicit changes on a policy and political level, which is very hard to really see as a viable avenue at this stage.
Emga, thank you very much for joining us. Emga Erasmus for us from South Africa. And we also apologize for the poor quality of that audio. Now, Moody's also has some bad news for Tunisia. Its negative outlook was largely due to delays in reforms as well as funding that would have come thereafter.
Moody's noted that the recent formation of a new government led by Prime Minister Najla Bouden paves the way for renewed negotiations with official and bilateral lenders. Analysts maintain that Tunisia needs a stable political and social climate in the next period.
It's necessary that the President declare the end of the period of exceptional measures and to announce a clear roadmap. This would convey a positive message of reassurance to international financial institutions and donors, as well as the countries that want to help Tunisia close the budget gap this year.
Moody's Investors Service added that for next year, renewed access to multilateral and bilateral loans will most likely rely on the successful negotiation of an IMF program that has remained elusive since the previous 4-year program was cancelled in April 2020. Experts have said that the absence of the conditions for a new funding could plunge the country into an unprecedented crisis.
For 2022, the situation will be very different and more difficult because the IMF knows well that Tunisia cannot develop next year's state budget without IMF funding. That's why the IMF will impose new conditions and reforms during negotiations and put an austerity program on the table. This scenario could have dangerous social repercussions and create a political crisis for the president, who had promised to improve the economic situation.
President Kais Saied criticized Tunisia's relationship with rating agencies and fund donors. The head of state also called for the need to change the sovereign ratings approach of international rating agencies.
The Transport Department will open all the pending files and reveal the state strategy as soon as possible in order to better manage all state-owned companies and enterprises.
Tunisian economists explained that rating agencies evaluate the ability of debt issuers to meet their financial commitments and determine the country's abilities to borrow from international financial markets. Moody's fiscal deficit estimate of 7.7% of GDP in 2021 and 5.9% in 2022 implies gross borrowing requirements of about 18% of GDP this year and 16% in 2022. Analysts assert that the deterioration of Tunisia's sovereign rating over the last decade is mainly due to the political instability and the decline in most economic and financial indicators. The new government of Najla Bouden needs to improve these indicators and to implement urgent economic and social reforms. Adnan Shawishi, CGTN, Tunis.
South African headline inflation was up 5% year-on-year in September from 4.9% in August. The news comes as some experts warn that the South African Reserve Bank could hike interest rates next month. Angela Kupla has this story.
Of some concern is the increase in core inflation from 3.1% in August to 3.2% in September.
We saw OER and rentals, mostly OER, picking up. And you would remember that in March, we saw a trough in that number. Subsequently, in June, we saw a pickup in both OER and rentals. And now in September, we've seen a further pickup in OER. And that's mostly what's driven core inflation higher.
There are also concerns about fairly significant intermediate price pressures on chemicals and plastics.
And what we're watching is to see whether those percolate up into the level of the CPI. But so far, we haven't actually seen that. And I think that's the very important question going forward, is how much of this kind of pipeline pressure actually ends up showing up in the CPI, which after all is what hits consumers and it's what the SARB is targeting.
There's also services inflation that could move higher from a historic low of 2.9%.
We are seeing more pressure from the goods side instead of the services side. But as we see vaccinations come through and people start to move around and possibly labor market improvements, we could see services inflation start to pick up, especially if you consider that there might be market concentration in some of these services industries, such as tourism, because of the pandemic and lockdown and some of those business closures. So we could see pricing pressure being passed on to the supplier or producer instead of the consumer.
Consumers will be worried about rising food and fuel prices when the data is published in the next month.
What's concerning is that we have food prices slowly starting to rise. We expected the fuel price rises. I think that's a given, and we're going to get more of them in future. So I think from now on, CPI is probably going to stay elevated above 5%. And I think if the oil prices don't come down pretty soon in the next month or two, I think it's going to be a problem for next year.
The upward movement of inflation is an issue, and the consensus view is that interest rates will be increased fairly soon.
So we think that the first rate increase is going to be only in March next year, but the market is pricing in a rate increase for the November meeting. And in fact, the market is pricing in 200 basis points of tightening over the next 12 months. We think that's far too hawkish.
With inflation pressures likely to keep trending upwards, there's going to be pressure now to increase those interest rates sooner rather than later. I'm Angelo Coppola for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
Malawi's President Lazarus Chakwera's state visit to Kenya has borne fruit. The two nations have furthered bilateral ties by signing 8 new agreements designed to strengthen their socio-economic bonds. The agreements covered broad areas of cooperation between Kenya and Malawi, including in politics, diplomacy and defense. President Kenyatta said collaboration and consolidation of ties between the two countries would guarantee socio-economic growth benefiting their citizens and the African continent as a whole, and called for effective implementation of the newly signed agreements.
Today, we held the 3rd Kenya-Malawi Joint Permanent Commission for Cooperation. The JPCC is an important mechanism for strengthening our relations and unlocking the unlimited political, social, economic, and diplomatic potential of our countries for the benefit of our peoples.
It is no small thing that we have successfully agreed to and signed 8 instruments of cooperation in defense, diplomacy, health, cooperatives, tourism, agriculture, and other areas for the mutual benefit.
A look at your corporate headlines. Stanlib has partnered with JP Morgan Asset Management as the race to become the best or biggest asset manager in South Africa heats up. JP Morgan Asset Management will become Stanlib's primary strategic offshore partner and complement its existing offshore offering. This will help Stanlib give its clients access to more global investment solutions. South Africa's Eskom is looking for corporate partner companies to help solve the country's energy supply crisis. Eskom, which generates the bulk of its electricity from coal, is shifting its focus to renewable sources of energy. The state utility has substantial plots of land which could potentially be used to put up renewable energy infrastructure such as solar and wind farms. Electric car maker Tesla has brushed off supply chain issues and the global microchip shortage to report record quarterly sales and profits. Revenues rose to $13.76 billion in the third quarter of the year, up from $8.77 billion a year earlier. The company, led by billionaire entrepreneur Elon Musk, posted a net profit of $1.6 billion and sold more than 241,000 cars. And last but not least, Alibaba shares surged more than 6% on Wednesday after billionaire founder Jack Ma was reported to be in Europe. Ma has kept a low profile ever since an investigation spiked what would have been a world record $37 billion initial public offering for Alibaba's financial group Ant last November. That's a look at your corporate headlines. 16 minutes into the hour, you're watching Global Business. Still ahead. Trade, tech and logistics top on the agenda at the Economic and Business Forum in Istanbul. And Egypt lays out plans to support local businesses as they rebuild amid the pandemic.
The world economy as we know it is about to change. Global business reports highlight emerging markets, developing countries, and dynamic sectors worldwide. We feature top analysts and newsmakers to provide perspectives on every facet of business. From an on-the-ground perspective, we provide you with balanced and objective assessments. Fast, sharp, and insightful. Global Business, only on CGTN.
Every story starts out like this.
Okay, we'll head up now.
But beyond the rush of the numbers, there's always a more fundamental question. What happened? Who has been affected? When market-moving decisions are made, who's responsible? And why?
Let's get some reaction on ground. Joining us in Johannesburg is Tunisia. Hello, Nairobi.
This is how all stories begin. See how they end. Only on Global Business.
There's more to this place than just glorious landscapes. There's more to it than just, say, Table Mountain or glorious, endless salt flats. There's more to it than countries that are home to some of the deepest mines in the world. There is so much more to this place, even if it is home to some of the finest diamonds on the planet. It is the sheer diversity of the people who call Southern Africa home, and the relentless drive to make it a better place that make it so special. And we know that because this too is home. No one knows Southern Africa like we do. CGTN, see the difference.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and Global Business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
The third Turkey-Africa Economic and Business Forum kicked off in Istanbul today. Many high-level officials as well as business leaders from Turkey and Africa attended the meetings. CGTN's Mikhail Bardavid has the details.
The main aim of the two-day forum is to discuss and strategize ways to deepen Turkey-Africa partnerships in trade, technology, investments, and logistics. This was also the title of the first ministerial meeting of the event that took place behind closed doors. Other session topics were focused on collaboration between Turkey and Africa on agriculture and agro-industries. A joint communique was published where participants agreed to encourage the private sector to invest in various industries such as tourism, aviation, maritime, and education. Sustainable health partnerships in post-COVID times were also debated, as the forum also underlined the need for increased supply of COVID-19 vaccines to African countries. B2B meetings took place in the afternoon, aiming to increase interaction between business communities and to initiate dialogue between Turkish investors, the African Union, and the African regional economic communities. On the second day of the forum, women leadership dialogue, trade financing in Africa, and banking relations with Turkey will be among the main topics of discussion. Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan is also expected to give a closing speech on Friday. I'm Michal Bardavid for CGTN in Istanbul.
It's a tough period for any nation trying to recover from the economic downturn caused by the effects of the coronavirus pandemic and the latest global energy shortages. As a result, the Egyptian government is outlining measures to support local businesses and help them grow amidst the economic volatility. CGTN's Yasser Hakim has more.
The government's set of incentives has mainly targeted the manufacturing sector. A crucial element is freezing electricity prices and subsidizing all energy costs for industrialists in the next few years to protect them from the looming global energy crisis.
This will be very encouraging for investors and comforting too, as energy prices constitute 30 to 40% of the cost of production for many industries. So freezing energy prices for 5 years creates stability and a positive climate for businesses, especially in that energy prices globally are increasing rapidly.
Special significance has been given to the African market, but a lot more needs to be done. Sharif El-Gabali, whose factories export fertilizers and chemical products in the continent, for instance, says support is needed to tackle the various challenges facing exporters.
African markets require a unique approach. There must be a physical presence in African countries. There must be logistical centers established by the state in various countries. Shipping and transport routes have to improve. Shipping lines are still not regular. Money transfer to some African countries are still a challenge, while in others are fine. Every country has its unique culture, and we should learn how to approach the different cultures. We cannot consider Africa as one market.
He welcomed the new incentives that include 80% subsidies on shipping costs, tax cuts for those exporting to the rest of the continent, and a state-owned holding company to market Egyptian products to the African markets.
Egypt has huge potential to export to Africa, whether in the engineering industries, agricultural products, electrical products, chemicals, and construction material. Our role is to open the door for the Egyptian products in the African markets. We only deliver 1% of Africa's needs, which is about $4 billion. We have an ambitious plan to reach tenfold this amount in the next 5 years.
The government is also giving special attention to local car assembly plants in its incentive scheme. Proper infrastructure at no cost, tax exemptions, and logistical support will be offered for companies that produce excess of 10,000 cars annually, using at least 45% local components.
The incentives program will cost the budget an upwards of $4 billion, but the government says on the long term it will help manufacturers grow, exports increase, create more jobs, and then bring in more tax revenue and attract foreign investments to the North African country. Yes, Hakim for CGTN, Cairo.
Tunisia's national carrier Tunisair, whose turnover has plunged by a third due to the COVID-19 pandemic, is negotiating with local banks to reschedule its debt. It has amounted to around $782 million over the past 12 years. The airline is expecting its activity to resume in 2022 with the lifting of health restrictions and the exit of Tunisia from red lists of high-risk COVID-19 countries.
Tunisair is facing unprecedented financial difficulties. However, the company needs the state guarantee to convince local banks to reschedule its debt.
The national carrier's financial difficulties continue. It's reached the deadline for loan repayment. The banks were flexible, but now they need their money. The state must intervene again and provide guarantees so that banks reschedule the debt repayment and order a new grace period.
The Secretary General of Tunisair Executives Union added that 2020 was the worst year in the history of the national carrier. The coronavirus pandemic grounded the airlines in Tunisia and the world.
Tunisair has structural problems, but the situation worsened in 2020 due to the COVID-19 crisis. The company has suffered losses up to 70% compared to 2019. The revenues dropped by 70% as well. The negative repercussions plunged the airline into a crisis, but recovery is still possible next year. We hope to resume normal activity and turn a profit by the end of the pandemic. Tunisair needs more planes and liquidity.
The Minister of Transport said that his department is developing a new plan in order to save the national carrier.
The Transport Department will open all pending files and reveal the state strategy as soon as possible in order to better manage all state-owned companies and enterprises.
According to the Transport Department, a salvage plan for Tunisair will be finalized in the fourth quarter of 2021. The company's balance sheet was positive before 2010, with a total reserve of about $177 million. Tunisair has a fleet of 29 aircraft, but only 18 aircraft can be put back in service after maintenance, while the rest are out of service. Aviation experts say the national carrier needs to streamline its profitability until business travel returns to normal after the pandemic. Adnan Shawishi, CGTN, Tunis.
Players in Zimbabwe's real estate sector are reconfiguring their traditional operating models in order to meet demands of changing client profiles and rebound from the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. Farai Mokutuya tells us more.
COVID-19 restrictions that kept workers at home and closed shops and offices dented property values as owners tried to accommodate tenants whose cash flows were disrupted.
When you have low demand of space, it means to retain occupancies, you may have to reduce your rentals. So the reduction in rentals versus a static cost of development, what it really means is your property values are now, they've gone down.
The residential market was not affected as much because players developed new models, including leasing out serviced stands as opposed to selling them outright.
Let's say buying a house, stand and a home is 100%. 40% of that value is usually going towards the purchase of the land. Now we are telling you, don't buy the land, lease the land, build your dream home, come and live in a dream home and continue paying rental towards that stand.
Even before the COVID-19 pandemic, Harare Central Business District was experiencing a drop in occupancy as many formal businesses fled congestion and some closed down. All 5 floors of this building used to be occupied by an upmarket department store. It has since been replaced by hundreds of informal traders. Such businesses are crucial for the survival of property owners who have millions of dollars in capital tied in these high-rise buildings.
Those little 10, 20 square meter, even a cubicle where somebody can bring their cell phones or their chargers or what have you, and if that's what they're selling, that's what they're selling. And you've got to meet the market where it is. Real estate is ever dynamic and must meet the needs of those people who are there versus those who used to be there or those who might come.
Some long-held practices may have to be revisited.
The traditional mentality of looking at leasing is to have a 10-year, 15-year, 20-year lease agreement. But with this kind of briefcase business, people, they want flexibility. They want to come and lease for one day.
It's estimated that more than 80% of Zimbabwe's labor force is engaged in informal economic activities. Farai Mokutuya, CGTN, Harare, Zimbabwe.
Young people in Africa are demanding that governments involve them in decision-making. That's the message from this year's Youth Connect Africa Summit taking place in Ghana. They also want opportunities to tackle the high unemployment rate so they can play key roles in the continent's development. CGTN's Nabil Ahmed Rufai reports from Accra.
It's a gathering of young people from Africa as Ghana hosts the 4th annual Youth Connect Africa Summit in Accra. More than 2,000 young people from the continent have come here to make their voices heard.
I feel like after the pandemic, this is a new experience, this is a new time for us to take over from the leadership to business, and such summits are critical to give us the platform to address these issues.
The summit like this is very important because it empowers the youth, the African energies, so that we can develop solutions for ourselves.
We have a lot as Africans, so we can do a lot from our continent. We don't have to look at the aid that comes in all the time. We can use agriculture, we can use the trade in Africa alone without even thinking about the foreign things that come in. We can get a lot of foreign exchange within ourselves.
The United Nations says Africa has the youngest population in the world, but the continent has yet to harness the full potential of its youth in socio-economic development. Rwanda's President Paul Kagame launched the Youth Connect Africa Summit in 2012 to empower young people across Africa.
No one needs to tell us that mass unemployment in Africa, especially amongst her youth, is a ticking time bomb. The so-called Arab Spring showed clearly that the lack of employment opportunities can undermine social cohesion and political stability.
Analysts want opportunities to be created for young people to take part in the operation of the African Continental Free Trade Agreement, which aims to boost intra-African trade. They believe this can help reduce unemployment among the youth.
Trade agreements are not about the past. Trade agreements are about the future. And that is why in the implementation of this agreement, the youth has to be at the heart. With the AfCFTA as an anchor, entrepreneurship is a key driver of economic growth, as it will enable young people to participate in the economy of Africa, thereby creating jobs.
Governments in Africa have also been urged to treat young people as partners for development. While there are concerns from campaign groups that the perspectives of young people in Africa are largely absent in decision-making, especially in policies that affect them, the youth here hope events like this can help create a positive change. And they hope this summit will not just be a talk shop, but one that will be backed by actions. Nabil Ahmed Rufai, CGTN, Accra, Ghana.
You're watching Global Business. Let's take a short break. Coming up. The UK and New Zealand reach a new free trade agreement. And we'll tell you how Australia is cashing in on the current energy crisis.
Change is on the horizon. Through the shifting of time, Africa's emerging tech landscape is creating new channels.
There's a hunger for local African content globally.
Shaped by innovation, carved out by a new generation of digital entrepreneurs, sculpted by a mobile revolution, and trickling down to the most remote corners of the continent. TechSpot is seeking out the new concepts in technology, disrupting Africa's traditional sectors.
You're watching breaking news on CGTN.
taken me completely out of my depth, but at the same time, it's exciting. It's new, it's different, it's a challenge.
It's really exciting.
No one again began holding guns.
Machine guns from police forces toward the protesters.
Were you worried about your life at that particular time?
Not at all.
The activity, thank you very much for your time now. What is your assessment of the state of the continent today?
Africa has the potential to power itself.
Excuse me.
Business in Africa is at a crossroads. We celebrate those who are adopting and thriving despite the challenges, from grassroots to big businesses. Global Business takes you along for the ride as we track the making of a giant.
Only on CGTN.
Accra is my kind of city. That's because when I'm here, I feel like I'm back home in Lagos or Abidjan, which are two of the major cities I grew up in.
Business in Africa is high risk.
After about a decade covering business news on the continent, I've learned it's all about the high risk, but also the high returns and the high energy. You simply have to adjust in order to keep pace. When I started out as a journalist, my dream was to open people's minds to the different perspectives. From the CEO in the boardroom to the trader out in the street, we all have different stories. From Accra to Addis Ababa, from Cairo to Cape Town, and I wouldn't have it any other way. Here at CGTN, we realize that Africa is on the move, and it's moving fast, but we're moving right along with it. I'm Ucheo Koronkwo, and I'm a business anchor and reporter at CGTN.
Welcome back to Global Business. Britain and New Zealand have reached a new free trade deal. The agreement is designed to reduce tariffs on nearly all products between the two countries. Last year, UK-New Zealand trade was worth over $3 billion. The deal comes after 16 months of talks and was heavily criticized by Britain's opposing Labour Party. Experts say the deal brings London closer towards signing a broader Trans-Pacific Trade Pact. In northeast England, a battery factory is pushing for green manufacturing with renewable energy and no fossil fuels in its products. Guy Henderson reports from Blythe.
Right now it's a rundown ex-mining area north of Newcastle in northeast England. In a couple of years, this will be Britain's first gigafactory. Work is just getting underway.
It's 230 hectares.
On a site tour, the CEO of the company that runs it, British Volt, explains that the substantial amount of power needed will come entirely from renewable sources.
In 100% green by our energy, we will not be using any fossil fuel-derived energy in the manufacturing process. We're connecting directly to the grid. We'll only buy green electrons. They'll either come through the grid, or we'll also be looking to connect directly to wind. And we've got a very large solar array on the roof of the factory. So 100% green electrons, no fossil fuels in our batteries.
That is not the only environmental challenge for the industry to overcome, though.
Britain will be banning the sale of new fossil fuel-driven cars in 2030 to protect the environment. So if it wants to continue to be a manufacturing hub for electric vehicles after that date, it's going to have to scale up its domestic battery production pretty fast. That will come with its own environmental footprint, though, one which will also have to be managed.
The fact remains current batteries still use non-renewable resources like lithium, which are mined. That leaves its mark. Efforts are underway to reduce the environmental impact by improving recycling techniques. At the moment, most battery cells aren't reused. Shredding's currently the most common method of doing that. Dr. Rob Somerville is part of a joint project between British universities aimed at refining that process, as well as separating the most valuable raw materials for reuse.
We want to separate the active material, so the graphite or the mixed metal oxide, from the copper or the aluminium. That way we can recover the aluminium as aluminium metal, as opposed to turning it into a slag and then losing all the embedded energy cost in trying to get the aluminium back as a metal. If we can also increase the purity, it will make our processes much more cost effective.
One expert says such research is cutting edge.
In terms of research and development, the UK is very well placed. There's a lot of effort gone in from Innovate UK, from the government, from universities, from various research organisations to keep the UK very much at the forefront of battery development, and in particular the sort of sustainability side of it. So looking at different combinations of chemicals, looking at their environmental impact. So I'm confident on that front.
There's likely to be more of these sites dotted across the country in the years to come. Making them sustainable is a work in progress. Guy Henderson, CGTN, Blythe in North East England.
As many countries around the world emerge from the global pandemic, they are entering an energy crisis. Demand across Asia and Europe is pushing up the price of coal and natural gas to record levels. That's proving to be a benefit for Australian exporters. CGTN's Greg Navarro explains.
Australia is the world's top exporter of coal, and at the moment, this abundant resource here has never been more valuable.
So you can do the math, right? $152 in August, and now it's $230. You know, coal never moves up. I mean, never moves up so in such large numbers.
There are several factors pushing up prices. That includes a shock to global supplies as economies emerge from the pandemic and revive industrial production.
The economic activity, particularly in Asia, has started to recover. And with these businesses and manufacturing, steel making, for example, starting to happen.
Extreme weather events have also impacted coal production and supply chains, and the Northern Hemisphere is headed into the colder winter months, requiring more energy for heating. Those demands are also pushing up the price of natural gas to historic highs, producing a windfall for Australian exporters.
LNG cargoes at the spot market are going for like 150 million, right? Normally these cargoes, you know, would fetch around 60 to 70 million. So, you know, a lot of LNG is leaving our shores at the moment.
While Australian exporters are said to benefit from a global energy crunch, Australian households are not. They'll face higher energy costs in a variety of ways, including here at the pumps. Experts expect coal prices to return to more normal levels, but believe demand for natural gas will remain high for some time. That's because of its popularity as a lower emission energy source than coal, as countries transition to a greater reliance on renewable power systems. Greg Navarro, CGTN, Sydney.
Tucked away in suburban Chongqing is a little-known digital town that is using modern technologies such as the Internet of Things to improve agricultural efficiencies and crop yields in China. Juju has the story.
We are now in Ganning, a digital town in Wanzhou district of Chongqing.
The town has been making waves ever since the Wanzhou district government teamed up with several scientific research institutes to establish the Three Gorges Agricultural Innovation Center. The center has helped more than 200 industry demonstration parks and over 10 modern agricultural companies to upgrade their planting and farming techniques for activities such as pig farming, tea cultivation, growing traditional Chinese medicine herbs, among others.
We are using fertilizing techniques imported from Israel. This helps to spread the fertilizer evenly across every vegetable seeding in the mountainous region. This was something we could not do earlier due to the rugged terrain. This 3D technology improved our planting efficiency by 10% and reduced costs by 20%.
For example, the intelligent greenhouse room that we are visiting today can adjust the temperature, humidity, light, oxygen level according to requirements. When the temperature is higher than 30 degrees Celsius or lower than 20 degrees Celsius, the control system can adjust it back to a normal range. The center also has a big data platform that can monitor crop growth and farming remotely. Three Gorges Agriculture Group is one of the participants that established the center.
By using a video link, our experts are able to provide real-time assistance and technical support for crop growth and farming. We also have some agriculture experts from Shandong, a province famous for advanced agriculture planting, to provide consultancy services. This method was really efficient during the pandemic. Our experts can provide services to a large area.
In the next step, this digital planting model will be promoted to more and more regions.
We have a digital farm called Shugu Farm in Liangping, Chongqing. There were several modern agricultural parks in Dazhou, Sichuan, but all of them visited our digital farm first to understand the design and the technology involved. Most of these agricultural parks are planning to market their produce in downtown Chongqing.
By 2025, the Three Gorges Agricultural Innovation Center plans to set up 10 national-level high-tech enterprises and achieve 30 agricultural scientific research breakthroughs. Zhu, CGTN, Chongqing.
Beijing Universal Student Studios has drawn in crowds since its official opening in September. The multi-billion-dollar amusement park is replete with technological innovations. Our reporter Wang Siwen looks into 5G innovations to improve tourists' experience.
Within a total of 4 square kilometers, full 5G coverage at the Universal Studios in Beijing. The 4G and 5G networks can support tens of thousands of users at the same time. With extensive indoor digital systems and macro cells, mobile phone networks that further boost the high-powered cell sites.
In the park, there are many high-end user groups. From our user traffic data, 5G offload ratio has reached almost 50%. The number of 5G users and 5G traffic has reached a very high level. We can meet our users' requirements and guarantee meeting the users' needs during peak time.
Live streaming, playing video games, chatting online, or just browsing TikTok. You could find yourself doing any of those while waiting for your turn at Harry Potter's Wizarding World. Just some of the 37 rides where the average waiting time could be at least 30 minutes. But the 5G network in the park can fully satisfy 4K high-definition video and guarantee a rate of 300 to 500 megabytes per second or even higher.
I use the app to check the real-time waiting time and traffic flow. The waiting time shown on a screen is consistent with the actual waiting time. It's not like it will show 10 minutes on the screen, and when I get there, it turns out to be 20 minutes.
And the wireless communication base stations support all of these.
Well, you may never notice or be able to spot. Those boxes are actually 5G wireless communication base stations that guarantee the communication services of the whole park. And there are 36 such boxes in the park.
As a pilot platform for 5G infrastructure, Universal Beijing Resort has been a pioneer in 5G network coverage, ensuring its visitors get the best experience of the latest tourist attraction. Wang Siwen, CGTN, Beijing.
Let's look at the commodities. Oil prices fell today as some investors cooped up profits from the recent rally, though solid demand in the US and a switch to fuel oil from coal and gas amid surging prices capped losses. Gold prices dipped slightly on elevated US Treasury yields, but there was some support from concerns over persistently higher inflation. The yellow metal remained trapped between $1,800 resistance and support around $1,750 due to the conflicting factors. US benchmark 10-year yields hit their highest in 5 months. Still ahead on Global Business. South Africa explores floating solar technology to boost renewable energy.
Africa is a continent of diversity, with varied climates and enchanting geography, and a people so distinct, but with a shared enduring spirit. We are at the heart of the continent to bring you the untold stories. Let's have a look. We celebrate Africa as it shapes its own destiny.
Tunis,
Syria,
Juba, Ethiopia, Tanzania.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Images may appear to be identical, but looks can be deceiving. The difference is not always obvious. It has to be discovered. There are always different sides to a story. We put the focus on the details. To see more, to understand better. CGTN. See the difference.
The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Panater, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival, and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
You don't find the stories of North Africa by sitting on the sidelines. No one else will take you where we can in North Africa. And no one else will show you what it's all about. CGTN, see the difference.
Let's head back to South Africa, where the city of Cape Town has begun exploring the use of floating solar technology as a potential source of renewable energy. A floating solar photovoltaic system was launched at one of the city's wastewater treatment facilities. It will be used to test energy returns as well as the quantity of savings in evaporation. CGTN's Travis Andrews has more on this report.
Floating solar technology has often been touted as an answer to Africa's energy and agricultural needs. Now the city of Cape Town has begun exploring that idea with the launch of its first floating solar pilot project. The city has begun testing the floating solar technology at one of its many wastewater treatment plants.
Because we know it is so expensive to get the land, this vacant land in the city of Cape Town. So we are exploring other options like using the floating solar. So what we are hoping to achieve is the information that we would love to get in order for us to be able to make informed decision when we have to launch this now at a bigger scale.
The energy and evaporation savings is being monitored and being tested against a ground-based solar installation. Floating solar panels produce more energy when they are cooler, and that combined with a reduction in evaporation levels means it's a potential solution for water scarcity.
The Water Technologies demonstration program look at is identifying innovative and sustainable solutions that can address some of the pressing challenges experienced in our water and sanitation space. So the Water Technologies demonstration program selected the floating solar PV system as an innovative solution.
The city of Cape Town hopes to secure over 300 megawatts of renewable energy by 2030. And they're hoping the results of this project ends up being favorable because they have enough capacity to roll this technology out on a large scale. With a number of dams and wastewater treatment facilities, the floating solar installation is a practical solution and has already shown to work in the agricultural industry.
We have done a similar design, just on a much larger scale, in the agricultural industry in Southern Africa, and we do believe it's the largest in South Africa to date. And the purpose of it was to firstly reduce the electricity tariffs that it was in the agriculture industry that they were paying, and at the same time we prevented the water from evaporating from the dam.
For now, the data collected from the project is set to inform future designs of larger utility-scale floating solar projects, which will be awarded through a competitive bidding process over the next few years. News, CGTN, Cape Town.
And finally, let's look at the currencies. The Kenya shilling lost marginally to the greenback. The shilling has lost 1.5% of its value so far this year. The South African rand, like other emerging market currencies, fell in sympathy with Turkey's lira, which plummeted to a record low after the country's central bank announced a sharp cut in its benchmark interest rate today. And with that, we call it a day here on Global Business. Thank you very much for watching. We welcome your feedback. Send it to the contacts on the screen and follow us on our digital media platforms. I'm Peninah Karibe. Thanks for your company.